to another episode of Power Move Makers. This series was created with a simple goal in mind: to bring to the table high-level executives, successful entrepreneurs, and just all-around inspiring human beings. Not just focusing on their successes, but really trying to shine a spotlight on the road they traveled to get there. Now, this week's guest, he belongs or has belonged to that envious club that we all want to get in, being a C-suite executive for many years of his career. He's also an entrepreneur. He has worked with, and I stress with, alongside, side by side with some of the biggest moguls in the game, starting with Shawn Diddy Combs to Shaquille O'Neal, Jay-Z, Damon Dash, just to name a few. Outside of all of those incredible things, because I was about to introduce him and say his name, but I want to stress that, to me, outside looking in, one of his biggest accomplishments is the fact that he is this incredible human being, husband, and father. Please welcome to this week's Power Move Maker series, Mr. Jameel Spencer. Jameel, welcome to the show.
My man, listen, I'm gonna need you to come and introduce me to my own family, because I sound way more exciting when you introduce me.
Nah, Jameel, I mean, you know, I couldn't get in here. I just scratched the surface of your career. Like, I felt like I was leaving things out. I'm thinking to myself, like, what am I missing? Because you've had an incredible career. Now, is this something, I want to get into your backstory, but I just want to start off from purely a psychological question. Was this intentional? Like, is this something you growing up, you said, I am going to make it into circles that most people will never have the opportunity to be in? I'm going to be working hand in hand with people that other people might read about, see on TV, because you have really found your way into these incredible circles that are not easy to get into.
No, that's a great question, and it's funny because I, now in the second half of my life and my career, right? I call myself in the beginning of the third quarter. Have really made the transition from instinct to intention, right? And so, quite honestly, I got in those rooms really just based on instinct, right? So when I came to New York, I was 21 years old, 20 or 21 years old. I went to an event that was produced by, which is interesting because now I could call these guys like my brothers, but by Chuck Bone and Wendell. It was a thing called New York Live, and I went and I saw literally every artist that I ever heard on the radio performing live. And the whole thing was being put together by young Black people who look like me, dress like me, talk like me. And it really it opened my eyes to something that I didn't even think was possible. Because, I grew up in Jersey. I went to college. I planned on being, an accountant or a doctor or something, one of those things that they say that you have to be successful. I planned on being successful for sure. I just didn't know how I was going to get there. When I got to New York and I fell in love with the energy and the movement that was taking place, being really, really driven by young Black people. I really just hung out with no agenda, right? I got to know a bunch of people and really just took my time. So I guess, the taking my time part was intentional. I definitely did not just take any opportunity that came my way. It's kind of ironic. I ended up working with Puff for a long time and definitely consider him one of my closest friends today. But I was actually offered an opportunity to interview for a job at Bad Boy when Bad Boy first started. Kirk Burrows called me and asked me to interview for a product manager position because he knew I did marketing or was interested in marketing. And I decided not to go to the interview because I had heard so many crazy stories about Puff. I heard about phones at people, and I was like, nah, I ain't with that. Me and Puff gonna be fighting if he throw a phone. It's gonna ruin my whole career before I even get started. So, I guess I was intentional in terms of knowing sort of organically what I thought was for me and what wasn't for me. But quite honestly, a lot of this stuff just happened to me, man. Just being in the right place in the right time, keeping my heart in the right place. And really, and I say this because this is something that I really try to tell young people, like, having meetings with people with no agenda is a powerful thing, because when you have a meeting and you need it to happen, there's a lot more pressure on the conversation, right? When you just having a conversation with someone with no agenda, you really unlock a lot of conversation, information, and opportunity that you may not have gotten to if you were singularly focused on landing this job or landing this deal. And so for me, it was really me just hanging out, man. And it's funny because the first real interaction that I had in the entertainment business was playing basketball, right? So I came to the city, I hung out every night. Me and my brother Brett Wright, who at the time had been, he was the VP of marketing at Uptown Records. He had a company called Yo B Consulting. I was probably like the first ever employee of Yo B Consulting, and we did this thing called the Music Basketball Association. So we had like a league with all of the entertainment companies. It was Bad Boy, Epic Records, The Source, Vibe Magazine, with a bunch of labels. And, every Monday we would have games at Martin Luther King High School on 68th in Amsterdam. And I was like, the organizer of the league. And then on Tuesday morning, I would send the stats from each game. But I always made it super entertaining. So I would give people nicknames. I remember Keith Clinkscales at the time was the CEO of Vibe Magazine. He and his brother were on a team. So I had the brothers Clinkscale. So the brothers Clinkscale would have 15 points, 17 rebounds, and 12 fouls, because they always had 12 fouls because they was hacking it up. And so, I got to know people more personally before I really engaged them professionally. And that's been that's a through line in my career, because, now I feel like every cultural phenomenon that's happened over the last 20 years is either connected to somebody that I know or is one phone call away. And so I think I really focus on, and again, this was not intentional. I can tell you, I can unravel the story now looking back on it. But I think I established my ecosystem first, right? People that I could count on, that I could call friends, that I could call for a favor. I established that first. And then I got in it and had opportunities that gave me an opportunity to exercise that ecosystem, right? And so I think, but now, and now that I'm older, showing up more prepared and being intentional about my journey has a lot more value, because now we don't have as much time. So when I came to New York, I was 20 years old. I had no kids, right? I had no wife. I had no responsibilities. I had no real bills. And so I had a lot more time to be willy-nilly about, I was hanging out in the club till late hours at night. I remember, one of the first jobs I had was this company called The Streets, which was started by Chris Latimer. Chris Latimer actually was the first person to start the whole concept of product placement, right? So when you would watch like the Snoop Gin and Juice video and see him wearing those hockey jerseys, or when you watch the Naughty by Nature video and they were wearing hockey jerseys, that was a result of Chris Latimer being on retainer with CCM, which was the company that owned the license for NHL hockey. They were trying to make their jerseys more relevant, and he placed them in music videos. And I remember, I was like working a temp job. I was PC support at Citibank. Was it Citi? It's not even called. It wasn't even Citibank. It was called something else back then. It might have been like I forgot the name of it. But I worked at a bank in the daytime from 8 to 5, and then I would go in the bathroom and put on Timbs and jeans, and then go to the streets and work there from like 5:30 till 11 o'clock at night. And then I would get a ride back to Brooklyn with Chris Latimer, and we would go to his crib and play Madden until like 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I had a lot more time. Now, I'm asleep by 10 o'clock because I don't got the energy I used to have. So I got to be a little bit more intentional around how I use my time. But yeah, so I think that it wasn't intentional. I think I had a certain energy that brought certain things to me, right? Because like I said, I was focused on the friendships more than I was focused on the opportunities. And I think there was something genuine about that maybe people weren't used to, because at the time, everyone was trying to figure out how to get on. Like that was really the assignment. How do I get on? How do I lock into one of these big organizations? How do I get a job with a Puff? How do I get a job with a Jay-Z? And I was probably one of the strange folks that would ever say, "Nah, I don't want to interview with Puff," right? And also because I was also mindful of wanting to engage those types of folks when I had something to offer, right?
Yep.
And I was still figuring it out. I didn't know, how I fit into this thing. It's funny because I originally intended to be in A&R. And I intended to be in A&R because I had heard all of the amazing things that Puff was doing. And I remember like Wendell Haskins, he was a friend. I remember, doing a call with him, and he was the first one that like let me know that I had no idea what I was even talking about when I said I wanted to be in A&R, because he was like explaining what it was. And I was like, oh yeah, nah, that don't sound like something I want to do. But so I took my time, and I think that was the most important time. I gave myself enough time. I took my time, and I did a lot of things with no agenda.
It's interesting that you say this, because outside looking in, I would have never guessed, outside of the fact that I personally know you and I know that you are just a good spirit, I would have never guessed that you had no agenda. You had no, like, you were not befriending these people with the intention of getting in a particular industry. So just so surprising. But I want to touch, because you're a big wig. You're known as a marketing expert. You have spent so many years in the fashion and entertainment industry. You bring up a point that I want to touch on, because so many of the people who listen to this podcast or will view it on YouTube, they're aspiring entrepreneurs. They're aspiring executives. You said, take meetings with no agenda. No agenda. It's important. But let's say you, right now, in this moment, how does somebody get a meeting with someone who's important? Like, what does that even look like? Because more times than not, you don't have the time. You don't have the bandwidth to just meet with somebody just because. So, it's just an interesting concept, and I want to touch on it. If someone walked up to you today on the street, how do they capture your attention to make you even want to give them 10 minutes of your time?
So I think it's a couple of things, quite honestly. And I think back. So first of all, there are multiple people who have reached out to me, or who I've actually sort of re-met, who will remind me of moments that they reached out to me when they were younger, and I engaged them. So I was once at a meeting. This young brother, he's super talented, and he's doing his thing right now. Antoine Phillips. He's running a bunch of stuff over at Gucci. He's on the board at Gucci. He's like the young brother making it happen over at Gucci right now. I was in a meeting with him. I was consulting Essence. I was in a meeting at Gucci trying to pitch them on the Essence Festival, and they were telling us that we had to wait because they just hired this young brother. Well, this new person. They didn't use those words, right? We just hired this new person. We want to make sure he's in the meeting. And he sat in the meeting, and quite honestly, I was thinking that he was like the black guy in the meeting that was going to hate on the whole situation, because sometimes when we get in that room, we don't feel comfortable, right, giving it up to us because we don't want them thinking that we're that guy, right?
That's right.
And ironically, the next day, he reached out to someone who worked at Essence and asked him if it was okay to get my number. And then he called me, and he reminded me that when he was interning at Calvin Klein, like right out of college, he had seen an article on me somewhere, and he sent me an email, and I responded, and he and I actually spent 45 minutes on the phone, and I gave him a bunch of advice, right? And so just imagine, the jewels there, right? The energy that you put out, especially when you're in the power situation, the energy that you put out could at some point come back to you, right? So you got to be mindful of how you treat people, because you want to make sure that when you meet that person again and they're across from that table, and maybe they're in a situation that can make or break the deal you're trying to do, they have a fond memory of how you treated them and how you made them feel, right? So that's one. I mean, I think there's two other ways, right? So another way is just to find a qualified introduction. So even right now, I find myself trying to do deals with CEOs or whomever it is, and I'll go and do a bunch of research on who's on the board, because 9 times out of 10 there is a connection to a connection to a connection. Mm-hmm. And so if you really, really do your research, you'll come to find out, because there's things that connect us all. I went to Rutgers University. I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. There's all of these things that have been a part of my journey that you could probably find someone who knows me if you do your research. But then last and definitely not least, just be creative about how you engage people. You know, those are the things I remember the most. I remember a guy sent me, he had been calling me. And, you know, this is back in the bad boy days. And, you know, back in bad, when we were bad boy, we had 18 million meetings, 18 million jobs. It was crazy. And so he had called me, you know, like 10 times. And I was always, you know, we would schedule a time to talk and I would always be doing something else. And then one day, the receptionist says, hey, there's a delivery here for you. And the guy had sent me like 10 boxes of Dunkin' Donuts donuts and a bunch of coffee. And he was like, yo, take a break. Give your whole team a break. Give me a call. And I was like, oh, that's dope. And so I called him up, right? So, like, you know, be creative, man. Like, I think that people should be mindful of that. Every interaction with someone that you don't know gives you an opportunity to show them who you are and how you move, right? So if someone could get a sense into your creativity, and it was like silly things, like even when I first started working with Jay, right? Because if you think about the timing of that, right? It was a time where Jay was actually coming back to the brand, right? He had been, you know, he and Dame were in a very public separation. He was now the president of Def Jam. Everyone was unclear as to, was it Jay or was it Dame, or could they be successful on their own? And he had not really shown up in a significant way for the Rockaware brand. And so with Jay, you know, I wanted to make sure I did things that did not depend on him to show up. I wanted to make the things that we were doing so hot that he felt that necessary to show up. So like one time I did a party during Fashion Week. I did it with Vanity Fair. I had like this dope spot. And, you know, I had Pharrell and Naomi Campbell. I had all these people coming, and I never even invited him. And so he calls me the morning of the event. He's like, yo, we having a party? I was like, oh, yeah. He's like, I was like, yeah, I didn't tell you, right? He's like, yo, why you ain't tell me? I was like, oh, you know, I know you're always busy, right? He's like, nah. So he showed up and he stayed like way longer than he would have stayed, right? And so, you know, just got to be mindful of just knowing that, you know, how you connect with people gives you an opportunity to show them who you are. Like, so if my value proposition is taste level and doing things on it, because I think when you work with those types of personalities, you know, everyone is pulling at them, right? In order to get the deal done, I would love to bring Puff into the meeting to get the deal done.
Correct.
And you said something very important, and this is I'm very proud of this, right? Because you said I worked alongside of those individuals, right? And we know there's a lot of people that work for them, and those people that work for them, you know, who they are was connected to being in that role, right? I have people to this day that don't know if I'm still doing Blue Flame, don't know if I'm working with Jay and Rock Nation. They don't know because I've done so many things, but I really prided myself on working alongside and giving just as much as I got back, because those jobs were always, you know, the type of jobs that got you a lot of visibility. And so what you did with that visibility, and was I going to run around and be the guy in the club yelling bad boy all the time, or was I going to be Blue Flame? And you know, like all of those artists that work there, I know every artist. I've been in the studio. I did marketing for those cats, but they still consider me Blue Flame more than they consider me bad boy. When I came to the 20th anniversary, that concert, I was backstage. And when I tell you, every single person was like, "Oh, bro, Blue Flame," what? Right? And I was really proud of that, because Blue Flame didn't exist before I got there, right? It was called Bad Boy Marketing and Advertising. And when we did that retreat in the Hamptons, you know, I came up with the name Blue Flame, and Blue Flame still exists today, and it's super successful. And I think what Dia and Erica and them did with that company took it to the next level. And that's what it's all about, man. Like, just showing people who you are every time you show up.
I love that you're bringing up so much great stuff. And Jameel, if you don't mind, because you are name dropping like a mother, but these are extremely important names that he's just said. Dia, we're talking about Dia Sims, one of the baddest women in the game. I mean, as an executive, as a human, she is one of the baddest in the game. Erica Pittman, same. like one of the baddest in the game. So you're glossing over some of these high level names that you have either worked with or preceded. But I just want to just point out, because it's something that I stress over and over and over again. Everybody is looking to befriend people on the top. Everybody's looking to befriend the people who are hot now. And I tell people this again and again: look to your right, look to your left. Those are the people who are going to be the next leaders of tomorrow. Those are the people who are going to be the next gatekeepers and a high executives that you can say, I've been friends with this person for 20 years. But we have to change the way that we look at things. Everybody wants to jump the line. And I just think it's so important. Even as I'm hearing you mention some of these names, of course, you can get in some of these rooms because you've been knowing these people long before they became the executives that they are today.
Man, so both of those people in particular, right? So Dia, I met Dia. Dia, Puff called me. I remember exactly where I was at. I was in Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, at my oldest son's baseball tournament. He called me and said, "Yo, would you mind spending an hour on the phone with my assistant? He's like, she's about to become chief of staff, but I really think she's talented, and I want her to run Blue Flame. Can you spend an hour on the phone and talk to her about what you did when we built it and what you think it should be going forward?" And I remember getting on the phone, and, most people are like, I'm not talking to this guy. I'm not that, right? So I remember getting off the phone and being like, she gonna get it done, because she asked all the right questions. She was focused, right? And then Erica was Lynn Burnett's assistant, I want to say, when we first started. What was the name of that company?
That Vanguard?
At Vanguard, right? So when I left Vanguard, I helped start Vanguard, and I left Vanguard before it really even got off the ground to come work for Puff. And I remember Erica Pittman. She was like right out of college or something, or the first job or second job ever, right? But again, one of the things that I pride myself on too, and I think this is probably Puff's number one skill set is, seeing talent at its early inception, right? And I think that the ability to give people credit when it's not obvious is not holding them to like the conforms of traditional skill set, right? So like even like a guy like Hemrock, Hemrock was like
worked for me for many years.
I think Hemrock worked for you at the time.
Hemrock worked for me for many years.
He's on the street team, and it's funny because I remember moments where we would do the white party at Puff's house in the Hamptons, and Hemrock would be invited, and some of the VPs and SVPs of the company weren't invited. And I remember having to explain to people, there's a difference between a bad boy party and the Shawn Combs party. And Shawn Combs is the most successful intern of all time. He sees talent in people, and talent is not in the traditional, or actually it's probably in the, because I remember I had an argument with Puff one time. He said to me, "You don't think I'm smart?" And I said, "No, I wouldn't say that I don't think you're smart, but I just think it's, it's something." And we went and looked at the definition of smart, right? And the definition of smart is way wider and more encompassing than what we've allowed ourselves to believe. We believe that smart is, knowing the Pythagorean theorem, right? And to be honest with you, like having people skills, having social skills, sometimes, especially in the business that we're in, those things will take you further. And that's something that a guy like Hemrock had at a very young age. Now, he needed to smooth this thing out, and that was going to come with time as he got older, and I was seeing him being super successful today. But you got to understand that this thing is not traditional. Like everything that we're doing, there's no manual for this universe that we built, right? And that's the power. Like we're in this crazy moment where, right, our parents were a part of like the civil rights movement or a byproduct of that, right? And they struggled to give us the opportunities and put us in the places that we were. But they didn't know, they didn't say, "Hey, you guys could create an industry, that multi-billion-dollar industry, and have a piece of that and be owners and entrepreneurs." They didn't know that, right? But they knew that they wanted us to give us the skill set to be able to figure that out. Now the kids that we're raising are looking at what we've done, and now like being an entrepreneur is normal, right? Like, so I'm saying that my mom wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer to be successful. My kids can see, they know a million, they got Uncle Puff, right? They look at, like, I remember I took my older kids to Made in America, and we went backstage and we're talking to Jay, and now my kids are older, and they're looking at, and Jay's, they're looking at it, they're being extra cool, and Jay's like, yo, give me a hug. Like, what y'all doing? Y'all, come on, bring it in. You know what I mean? And so because that's how unaffected they are. Like, most people get a chance to be around Jay-Z, they trying to take a picture, they trying to, right? And my kids is being cool, like, you know what I mean? And he's like, nah, what you doing? I've known you your whole life. I knew your dad before he had kids. Right? So yeah, man, I think that you bring up an interesting point in terms of just being, first of all, like I said, just generally, if you look at yourself as a brand, right, you want to sell your brand to everybody, right? You don't want to have a brand that's just for one person. Just you don't want to be a person that manages up. I only do a really good job of talking to the CEO. I only do a good job of talking to anybody VP above. You want to be somebody. I remember, like, I've been the only Black person in a lot of rooms too, right? And I really, really prided myself on, I felt like Muhammad Ali in the office, right? Because I was like the guy that the guy in the mailroom could look to and be like, yo, I could be that someday, right? So usually the Black and brown folks that did work at these companies were not in real senior positions. And so I made my point to make sure to connect with them, to know their names, to know things about them, to help them out, to give them opportunities that they wouldn't get. So I would be giving them tickets to stuff because, if we don't raise our people up, who will, right? And so you don't want to be that. You don't want to be that only Black person in the building forever, right? that ain't. Then you didn't.
Hold up, stay there. Oh man, I love that. Let's go back. You don't want to be the only Black person in the building forever. Do you understand how powerful that statement is?
Yeah, because because you didn't do your job. You didn't do your job. Your job is not the work.
Woo.
The job is the upliftment of the people. Like I'm irrelevant if it ain't for the people. If I can't call on the people, if I can't help move the people, then I haven't done my job. Right. And so, I'm trying to tell you, I would have straight fights and arguments. Like, so, I worked at, I've had like you said, right? I've had a super duper blessed career. You know what I mean? I worked with Shaq. I went from Shaq to working with Lynn Burnett and Keith Clinkscales, and Jeff Tweedy in the middle of Jeff Tweedy and Shaq. So Lynn Burnett, Keith Clinkscales, Puff with Derek Ferguson and Andre Harrell, like, right, that's crazy, right? And then I left that and worked with Damon Dash, and then I was with Jay and John Maneely and Tracy Wibb and Jay Brown, right? And then I started working with these big public companies, Neil Cole, Kenneth Cole's brother, and my man Yehuda, who I still call my brother to this day, right? But when I got into those rooms where I was the only Black guy, which was dramatically different, right? Because the energy of working at a Bad Boy Entertainment, right?
Correct.
The energy of working at a Shawn Carter Enterprises. Like, it's family. It's family. And when we disagree, it might be a fist fight, but we definitely end the party later on in the night together, right?
Correct.
You go to these other companies where you're the only Black person, it's different, right? Like, you have a conversation, you think you on the same page, then you find out that person went behind your back and it ain't what you thought it was. Like, it's different. And I fought for because first of all, I was very intentional around hiring Black folks in those companies, right? I mean, in the Iconics Neil Cole world, I brought the Black folks with me, right? I was able to work with, and I still consider them my family today. So, Bertia and Alicia Smalls, I fought for them every time that we had reviews to become VPs. I was like, yo, y'all need to put these Black women, because I'm looking at these other people who have privilege in these roles who aren't even nearly as talented as them, right? And some Black folks would get in that room and be happy to be the only one there because that means that they're good.
Wow.
But if we ain't good, then I ain't good, right? If we ain't good, then I ain't good. I didn't do my part.
Talk that talk, Jameel. Talk that talk. You mentioned so many of these iconic names. Can you tell me, and I'm just interested to know the different management styles between a Puff, a Jay, a Dame, Keith Cleanscale, and what you learned from kind of each of them and how you have used what you learned when you became a manager of people.
Yep. Yeah, man. I talk about this a lot, actually. We'll start. So Keith and Lynn, really interesting, right? Because Keith is super smart, super cerebral. But he was really kind of arm's length. Like he was the visionary of the business, and Lynn Burnett was more like the politician, right? Like I remember walking in to these advertising agencies with Lynn Burnett, and it was like being with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like these old white women was fawning over him, like, yeah. And so I think I learned a lot from both of them, right? But Lynn is like, the king of charisma, right? And then I left there and worked with Puff, and Puff is just literally the hardest working person I've ever met in my life. Like, and I know for sure no one will ever outwork him. And I think the testimony to that is the career that he's built, right? Like the fact that he still remains today as relevant as he was, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, is a testament to the work ethic and the fact that, and the power of reinvention, right? He is focused on reinventing himself, so much so that he changed his name 15 million times, so much so that he's done things that, running the marathon and going on Broadway. Like he just, because think about it. I mean, what would you call, I guess right now today, he would be called mostly an entrepreneur, but at one point he was considered a musician, and he really hasn't made music in years, but still is relevant in the music industry, probably one of the most relevant people there is. And so that's, he's a king of reinvention, hard work, anything is possible, don't take no for an answer. Definitely got that from him. So, so when I talk about the Jay and Puff thing, because it's funny, when I remember working with Jay and Puff calling me and being like, yo, you need to come back. You can't be over there with them. Them niggas is light skinned, man. You ain't over there with light skin. You're supposed to come back home with me, right? And so I liken Puff to, he's Michael Jordan, right? He's the guy that worked hard as shit. He got cut from varsity his sophomore year and never forgot it and worked hard as hell to become the greatest of all time, right? Jay, on the other hand, is Muhammad Ali, right? He's Muhammad Ali, and he moves like a drug dealer. I would really be interested to hear his instinct versus intention scenario, because quite honestly, I think that he just lives by a code, right? And he says no way more than he says yes. But whenever he says yes, it's culture changing and culture shifting. And the power that he has is not lost on him. Like he's completely aware of it. He's been aware of it for a really long time. I think that at one point there was an arrogance connected to it. And now I think that there's sort of a responsibility associated with it. I think he wanted to make history. So I always talk about, Puff wanted to make music and then he wanted to make history. I think Jay wanted to make history, and now he wants to change the world, right? And I think they're both, because we're all in the third quarter now. So I think they're both in that zone of just trying to leave the world a better place for their children and their children's children. And so, that's Jay. And then Damon Dash, man, I didn't get a chance to work with him that long, but it's really interesting because I think that people see Dame and they see this brash, bravado personality, and I think that's all so that you don't ever get a chance to really know what an amazing person. He doesn't want you to know how, because everybody's not allowed to get in. So that's like, that's the gate to keep people out, right? But if you listen to the things he's saying, right, you can't argue with it. Like the large majority of the energy that he exudes is necessary, and it's all about being comfortable in your own skin and not taking, and not taking no shorts, right? And anytime a black man tells you he's great, it makes people uncomfortable, right? Just inherently, right? A black man tells you he's great. I don't care who it is, Muhammad Ali, LeVar Ball, Floyd Mayweather. Anytime a black man tells you he's great, they want us to be, a little bit easier to digest, right?
And not to interject, but not just tell you, but believe it. Like when they say it, they believe I'm great. Like, I don't need your validation. I am great.
Yeah. And so, yeah, man. Like I said, and then last but not least, because now I'm working alongside a Rich Dennis, who he and Emmett, Emmett Dennis is definitely my best friend in life. They started. That really Rich and his family, and then Emmett helped them take it to the next level. They started Sundial and Shea Moisture, and were able to sell it to Unilever for a ridiculous amount of money. And so just think about that progression, right? Like Ethan Lynn to Puff to Jay, and then now Rich, right? I feel like all of those experiences were sort of meant to inform the value that I could add to what Rich is trying to build. And what Rich is trying to build is all about, empowerment and ownership and us owning this culture, right? Because the reality is that the impact that we provide to things that we don't own is almost criminal, right? Because no one else would do that, right? No one else would help build these things and not own a piece of them. And so what happens when we decide to take that energy and that impact and invest it on things that we own ourselves? Then you have the Sundial selling to Unilever for, $1 billion or whatever it is, right? And that's really the transformation. So, and I think that, I met all of these people at the right times in their lives where we made sense for each other, right? So I was in my late 20s, like 25, 26, when I worked with Keith and Lynn. I was like, at the end of 20s, early 30s, working with Puff. So I had the energy to do that, because you need energy to run around with him and do all that. I was getting a little older and a little bit more subtle when I started working with Jay, which worked for because how he moved, because he moves a little bit slower or more measured than how Puff was running around. And then now with Rich, we're trying to do things. We're investing in the future, right? What the impact of what we do together, if done properly, will have an impact on the future. We might not even get a chance to see
correct
the fruits of it, which has got to be okay. Like, that's got to be okay.
I want to touch on something, because you just mentioned your timeline. So a couple of things stand out to me. It's a sermon that I once heard preached. A good friend of mine, Callie Crowder, who she sent me a sermon from a pastor, and he preached a message called Necessary Endings. And he got the message from a book that he read, and I later went out and I read it, by Dr. Henry Cloud, called Necessary Endings. And the concept is, in life, in order for there to be a new beginning, there must be, and I want to underline that word must, not that, it should be, it must be a necessary ending, not just a regular ending, but a necessary ending. And as I'm listening to you, and I'm, just hearing and following the timeline of, in my 20s, I worked with Keith Clinkscales and Lynn Burnett. Then I went on to Puff. I still had the energy, but as I was winding down, it went to. Can you speak about, because sometimes, even when the opportunity looks great, in order for you to advance to the next level of your life, the next level of your career, there must be a necessary ending. Can you speak, when should people go? When should people know this served its purpose? There's a winter, a spring, a summer, and a fall. This was my spring over here.
Yep.
Now it's time for me to go into my summer And it might not be, you know, I might be leaving somebody I love. I might be leaving somebody I enjoy working with every single day.
Yeah.
But it served its purpose.
You know, it's funny. Most people stay too long, right? And by the way, with those types of personalities, it makes sense, right? Because listen, you know, you're working with these people, and one of the value propositions of working with them is like being connected to them. So like, you know, when you're younger, like, you know, you walked up to a club, right, and you brought out your bad boy card. They letting you in. They don't have to know who you are. Like I always make the joke of like, that title's not going to get you in the club, right? You need titles to get you in the club.
That's
and
right.
So I think that the fear is, you know, if I disconnect from the energy of this movement, will I be able to recreate it somewhere else on my own, right? And we've seen it, like in the Bad Boy scenario, right? There's a million people that left Bad Boy at the highest of highs and ended up really having to come back because they could never recreate that energy someplace else. And then, you know, there's a laundry list of those people, right? And so, you know, my litmus test, quite honestly, was always that, and I think this is probably why I did so well in those rooms. You know, I was always most excited to be connected. Like the most important people that I was connected to was my family, right? And so to the extent that, you know, it was going to be good for me and my family, then it made sense. When it stopped being good for me and my family, then I moved on to the next thing. And I moved on with the confidence that I knew for sure that it was me, right? So sometimes when you're working with Puff and you're trying to get somebody on the phone, right? Oh, this is Jameel from Blue Flame. You know, Shawn Combs told me to call you. That's easier to get on the phone. At a certain point, when it becomes, you know, this is Jameel Spencer on the phone, and people want to show up for Jameel Spencer, then you know it's you.
There you go.
So, you know, I think it's more about, you know, just being confident that you bring in as much value as you're getting by the association. Again, like I said, I didn't leave working with Puff thinking, let me go work with Jay-Z now, right? It just kind of happened because it made sense. I remember actually the way I actually got to Jay was I was working with Dame. I had come to him and said I was going to help him with this ad campaign as a consultant. And again, very similar to like, how do you get these opportunities? I said, you know what? I'll come help you do this. You don't even got to pay me. Don't pay me. I said, but at the end of 30 days, if you think it has value, then pay me what you think it's worth, right? And so 30 days came, I did my thing. I walked into the CFO's office. He had met literally 15 other marketing people that had met Damon before, so he didn't think I was serious. And he thought that he told me to go meet with Jay. You want to get paid? Jay's running the company now. You got to go talk to Jay-Z. And that was his way of saying, leave me alone. Because he didn't think there was any universe that I was going to go and have a meeting with Jay. And I was like, oh, go meet with Jay? Okay, cool. And I called Carlene, right? And I went up to Def Jam and I sat in the office with Jay and Tracy Wakefels and Jay Brown and Tata for an hour and 45 minutes. We brainstormed this whole thing. And so, you know, ultimately, you got to know that what you're bringing to the table has value. And once the relationship becomes no longer is mutually beneficial, right? That's what all relationships need to be mutually beneficial. When they stop being mutually beneficial and they become one-sided, if you can't have a conversation and right-size them, it's time to move on. But what happens is most people stay too long because they're afraid that they can't reinvent themselves somewhere else. That if it ain't, you know, Jameel from Bad Boy or Jameel from Rockefeller or Jameel or whatever it is, if your name ain't, if after your name you can't associate big time movement, big moment thing, then people ain't taking the call the same. And I never really was concerned about that because, like I said, I was always doing it for my family. And like I said, to the extent that it stopped making sense for me and my family, it just don't make sense.
Okay, I love that you bring up family, and I want to touch on that, but I want to go backwards. And I don't typically ask these types of questions I'm about to ask you on this show, but because you're not just a regular person who worked with these people. You worked alongside of them. You're friends with them. You can pick up the phone and get directly through them. Why do you think, you know, if you don't really have an answer, that's fine. But I use this platform every chance that I can. I think Puff catches a lot of flack. He catches a lot of heat out there. And I don't think that there are enough people like yourself, like myself, who have come from that school and has done extremely well for themselves and have the yin to the yang of people who find it necessary to dump on his name. But I don't necessarily get that with the Jays of the world or any of the other executives out there. Why do you think he gets it so much? And just as a bigger picture, like, you know, you don't hear this going on in white companies, and it drives me crazy. If you work for Chase Bank or you work for IBM or Apple, you don't see people coming out the woodwork years later talking about Steve Jobs did X, Y, and Z to me, or the president or the owner of Chase did X, Y. Why is this so prevalent in our community? And what is it about him? Because even within our community, I don't necessarily hear that with the Jermaine Duprees or any of these other guys who built these incredible businesses.
So I think it's two things. I mean, the first part is obvious, right? We are inherently crabs in a barrel just because of how we've been socialized here in America, and it's not our fault. But at some point, it not being our fault can't be okay, right? We got to stop pulling each other down because that's just not it's not productive, right? It's not healthy. At a certain point, if we're trying to become healthier and more successful and more advanced as a people, we got to start breaking some of the historical chains that have always held us down, held us back. With Puff in particular, especially, different than maybe some of those other examples that you gave. The problem with Puff, the gift and the curse with Puff, is that he is so charismatic and so infectious that everyone feels like they're closer to it than they really are, right? And so, like, he's the type of person, because he's a salesman, right? And he could sell anything to anyone, and he's the guy, he's putting that battery in your back. And if he thinks that you're a star, and by the way, he thinks a lot of people could be stars. Now, whether you realize that stardom or not is really on you, based on the energy that you put out there. But if he thinks that you could be a star, he's going to put that battery in your back. He's going to see you, and which is really, really counter to what people think of him when they see him from the outside looking in. You don't realize what a celebrator of people that he is. And he's going to call you. I remember when I didn't work there, and I was working with Jay, and I did some campaign, and I remember we looked at the ad campaigns like the Super Bowl. So we would just go crazy. So I remember I had like 35 pages, like the first 35 pages of Vibe magazine, the first 25 pages of The Source. And I remember Puff calling me like, nigga, 35 pages? Oh my. But he's going to call you and he's going to celebrate you because that's who he is. And so that energy makes people think that he owes you something, right? That when he's putting that battery in your back. Now realize this about Puff though. When you stop being relevant, he still likes you, but he ain't concerned about you no more. That's who he is, right? And so, and he does have a small universe of people that I think he calls friends that, that's not the litmus test. But I think there's still frustration even in those regards because Puff is always on to the next. Puff is staying next to and around whatever is hot in culture. And so if you're a hot executive, he's trying to find a way to get you to come work for him. If he can't have you come work for him, then how can we do business together? If you're a hot artist, you're the hottest artist, he's going to come and meet you. I guarantee you that there's no big artist right now today that he has not had a conversation with, probably had to his house and had wine and food and really spent significant time because he is a curator of culture, right? And to the extent that you're on the pulse of culture, then he's spending the time and energy. The problem is, if you think about it, a guy that's been relevant for the last 25 years, it's hard to keep up with all that, right? Yep. And so the guy that is the hottest executive, hottest entrepreneur, hottest whatever it is that's relevant to him today, and the guy that was that 25 years ago, that's not that anymore, that guy and by the way, the frustration that those people have with Puff is their inability to look at themselves for not doing their part. Their inability, and 9 times out of 10 is somebody that's just bitter, because no one that's successful is walking around bitter about what Puff didn't do for them. Let's just be honest, right? If you're successful and you came from the Puff school, then you appreciate what he did for you.
Correct.
Whether you had a good experience or bad experience, no matter what, you walk around today, James Cruz walks around today still appreciative of the gifts and the jewels and the time, the good, bad, and indifferent that he got with Puff, because James Cruz ain't James Cruz without the Puff experience, right? And same thing with you, same thing with me, same Emmett, whoever worked there and is still flourishing, we got fond memories of it, because you realize, like, sometimes the medicine don't taste good, but if it makes you feel better, then that's what it is, right? But if you taking that medicine, right, and you still sick, then you mad. I'm taking this damn medicine and I'm still sick, right? And so, like, just to keep it a buck, right? Like, I would imagine, the large majority of people who are walking around mad at Puff really are mad at themselves for either they didn't do what they thought they were supposed to do, or they didn't work hard enough, or they stayed too long, or whatever it is. And those are all things. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that goes bad between two people that's just one person's fault, right? And it's convenient for people to blame it all on him, because you know what? They're watching him and he's still soaring and they're not, and that shit hurts. Yeah. That hurts. It's like, man, I was with him every day. How was I with him every day? And now he's doing all these things and he's in these rooms and I ain't in these rooms. Oh, I'm mad, right? Where if you're still doing your thing, you're not giving it to you. You don't even got time to think about it like that. I appreciate everything that I ever went through with anybody in any way, because I'm too focused on still being successful. I'm focused on still winning. And so I don't got, like, being focused on winning doesn't give you the time to focus on, what could have been. And the reality is that if you don't look at the tough times and the negative things as positive influences to your life, then you got the wrong perspective, right? There's no such thing as a loss. There's just a lesson.
It's a lesson. So
I think that you don't give up. Yeah. And so I think the people that are mad at Puff, like, it's wasted energy. I would even the people, and again, I'm sure there's stories out there that make all the sense in the world if somebody took the time to sit there and listen to you about it. But, like, you couldn't even tell me the story, because I'd stop you in the middle of it, like, my man, that ain't none of my business. Like, my business is in keeping things moving in the right direction. I can't be talking about what Puff did. I mean, unless he's your father or somebody in your family, like, that's not his responsibility. It's not his responsibility for you to still be successful today. That's not his job, right? And he might have done things that weren't fair, but you know what? I mean, at a certain point, like I said, we all men, we all women, we're all people that showed up for a relationship. So maybe if you didn't have your paperwork right, there's a lot of reasons why, like, nobody could get over on anyone that didn't contribute to it in some way, right? No one's full on a victim. Like, you might be a victim of a circumstance, but you definitely contributed to those circumstances.
I love that you touched on this guy's not your father. And, I'm so happy to hear from your perspective. I think it needs to be more stories, more voices, more people coming forth. What I got from that school, that PhD in business that I personally got, I don't care if that man don't never do nothing else for me.
And you got paid for it. And you got paid to learn.
I
mean, like, that's the, and I call that's my business school. Like, I remember when we had Blue Flame, there was two members of the team. It was Emmett, yep, and it was Guy Primus. And Guy Primus had a Harvard MBA. And I remember, being, like, mildly intimidated by that. Like, damn, this guy is reporting to me. He got an MBA, right? But he was looking at me like, nah, man, you done did all these things. And I look at that time that I spent with Puff at Bad Boy as my business school. I learned how to move. I learned how to show up. I learned how to be prepared. I learned how to not take no for an answer. I learned how to, like, the value of work ethic. Like, I learned so much from Puff. I've learned so much from every experience. And that's the reality, is that if you are upset about your experience, then you haven't taken the value of all the learnings, right? Because that's all they were, good, bad, or indifferent. Like, there's nothing that has happened to me in my career, right, where I could say, oh man, I'm still mad about that. Nah, you gotta move on, because that energy, you can't hold that energy. Like that energy just holds you back.
Yeah, it's not productive whatsoever. You know, you said something. He was like, he's not your father. You're a father. And as long as I've known you, you've been a damn good father. Family first, always. We come from a generation when in our community, a lot of Black men didn't show up. A lot of Black men had kids, but wasn't necessarily daddies. You know, they were fathers, but they weren't those daddies in their kids' lives. Why do you think in this generation, and even you in particular, why is it so important, your family? You mentioned that's your litmus test. That's when you know it's time to leave, when it's affecting your family. Why is that such a big thing? And why do you think now, and I'm proud to say, so many more Black men, so many more are showing up and are ever present, and they take their job as fathers and daddies so much more serious than even the generation before?
I think it's a reaction to how we were raised. So, you know, I know for myself, like in high school, you know, I went to like an all white Catholic all boys school, and you know, if there was 250 students in my senior class, maybe 17 of them were Black, and of those 17, nobody had their actual dad in their house, right? And so as a result, we kind of raised each other. You know, we were our own family to each other, checked each other. And as a result, you know, we all today are much better fathers to children than our fathers were to us. And, you know, I'm at the point now, because there was a time when I was like mad about, you know, my interaction with my pops. Now me and my pops have a good relationship. You know, I appreciate the fact that like he didn't know who his father was. Right. So it's a generational thing. This whole thing was, so, you know, the way he was being a father was that's what he knew. Right. He didn't know he's supposed to he's supposed to teach me how to throw a baseball. He didn't know that. Right. I just knew that I always was going to be something different to my kids, that I was going to father differently. And quite honestly, it's just the most important job you'll ever have. Right. Just think about the fact that you are responsible for shaping the mind, heart, and soul of a young person. And this person will go out into the world and impact the world in some way. And so it's always been the most important job I ever have. And I treat it like such, right? And it's an integral part of my day, right? Like I remember even back at Bad Boy, I remember, you know, rushing to go make it to my son's football game, or rushing to make it to my son's softball game, baseball game, because, you know, I wanted to make sure he saw me there, and I knew, like, it wasn't even a thing where I was like, miss the game. Like, I never even thought about missing the game, because like there's no such thing, right? There's no such thing. If I'm physically capable, that's why I literally have been to LA for the day and come right back. Even when my kids moved to LA when they were my son was in high school, you know, his first ever basketball game. He walked into the gym. Who was sitting there? I was sitting there, right? I flew there. I was sitting there waiting. And he was like, "Oh wow!" He was bugging like to see me there. But I was like, "Why would I start missing things now? Like I ain't missing nothing." And it's, you know, listen. It's as much for me as it is for them. You know, I kind of I'm given a chance to relive my childhood through their eyes. And really give them the information that I wish I had when I was a kid, but also realizing that my experience was necessary, because if I didn't have the experience that I had, then I couldn't be the father I am today, right? So all of the things that happened to me and it's funny because my kids are annoyed. I tell these same stories over and over. When I was a kid, they're like, oh my God, they're telling me with the same, right? But like, you know, it's a testament to the fact that everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, right? If my dad was in my life the way I wanted him to be, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I really like the person I am today. So you know what? You're off the hook. I'm no longer angry at you, because that's not productive. right? And now I'm able to have a different relationship with my dad. That is something that I never even had before, right? Like it's like we have like a grown man relationship where like he's showing up in my life today in ways that I had no place for, right? And then also like my stepdad, like so my mom got remarried when I was like, I was young. I was like, I don't know, 12 or something like that. And this guy like was an amazing father to me, and I didn't appreciate it until I had my own kids. And then I've spent the last 20 years. My oldest son's 24, so 24 years being like, yo, man, I was bugging. Like I really appreciate you, because what it takes for a man to be a father to someone else's child is amazing, right?
Yes,
like that's amazing. That's a blessing. And so yeah, man, I it's who I am. Like you can't know me and like know me well and not know, the father I am, the husband I am. Like it's part of my brand. And it always has been a part of my brand. Even back when I first, we were first starting this whole thing, it was kind of who I was and how I showed up. And it actually made me different and made me disarming because back then, you're working with Puff, you're working with Jay, like y'all running around doing all type of stuff and y'all competing with stuff. I was never in that, right? I was going home. Nah, I'm not, right? And so I think that was also, made my existence a little easier on people, because I wasn't playing the same game everybody else was playing. I was playing a different sport.
Jameel, I love that you answered the question the way that you did, because I don't know that there's enough men of your caliber who are brave enough and really put their family first and their kids first. So, just you answering the question the way that you did, I think that it kind of gives the green light to so many people who would normally hide the fact that they have kids and they got this family, to go ahead and just put it out there. Like, it's okay to be a father. It's okay to love your family. It's okay to be a father to your children. So I love that you answered the question in the way that you did.
No, but you know what? I think more than okay, like we got to make it cool. So like one of the biggest sort of marketing plans that have ever existed against us as a people is how they have found a way to disconnect the family, right? So like you get, Black women to tell you, I don't need no man, I can do bad by myself. You get people promoting this notion that 70% of Black households are led by just women, single women, single moms. Which, and I'm a product of a single mom. I know a bunch of brothers, and I, by the way, I would definitely put my bet on a Black woman all day. I was raised by my mom and my two grandmothers, right? And so I get that. But that's not the best foot forward for us as a people. The best foot forward for us as a people is for us to be connected. And when we create this dynamic that it's not cool to be in a monogamous relationship, it's not cool to show up for your kids, then that's just showing like the most self-hate ever, right? Like that's crazy that we could create a narrative where you're not cool because you don't have multiple women, right? Or you telling everybody that you're like, even with my kids now, like, I have 5 sons, right? And so my whole conversation to them, because like the way I grew up was we really our social prowess was connected to how many women could we get with, right? That was a thing. Like that made you cool, right? Yo, this guy got all the girls, right?
Yep.
And for me, as a man that's raising a bunch of young men and a young woman, right? It's more important for me to explain to them is like, no matter what it is you're doing, be honest, like live in your truth. Because I think what happens is we start to believe that the truth is not enough. That if we're honest about how we're moving, what we're doing, what we're thinking, and what we're feeling, that's a vulnerability that we're not ready to live with. And the reality is, as you get older, you start to realize that, the more honest you could be and the more you can live in your truth, then it's like life becomes really, really easy, right? You don't got to remember no lies. You don't, right? You don't got to come up with no alibis. You could just do you. And that's okay. And by the way, like even when you were young, like if you honest, like one of the things I'm watching that Power Ghost joint, right? And it was a moment on the show where the kid Tariq was, he was I guess he's hanging out with 2 different girls, Come to find the one girl has a boyfriend. The girl is uncomfortable because she got caught out there, and he goes and sits next to her and it's like, nah, what you running for? It's cool. Like, we young, everybody got options. And then another girl calls his phone. She's like, who is that? He's like, I told you, everybody got options. Like, and to me, that was a powerful moment for young black men, because it's like, our dynamic was to lie, right? Lie. No, you can tell her this, you tell her that, right? And I think that, like, there's so much value in living in our truth, because once you start to apply it to things that make you vulnerable, it becomes really easy to apply it to every other part of your life. And life just becomes a lot easier when you're just being honest.
No, it's so true. And this is, I'm glad that you're raising 5 boys and to have a dad like yourself, because that's something, that's maturity speaking. That's experience speaking. I've been there, done that, and I done had enough time to sit, meditate, be quiet, be still, and understand that in the end, if you're living your truth and you are honest, that's all you need. So I'm glad that I'm not gonna say finally at that place, because we all come to this place, because it wasn't cool, coming up to not lie, have multiple women, whatever it was. So to be raising a generation and let them know, like, nah, that ain't nothing cool about that. It's okay to have one and love one. The fact that you are raising kids, men, boys, I think that that's a wonderful thing. And then to have the one girl see this, yeah. I think that that's extraordinary. So good for you, Jameel.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Before we wrap this up, got a couple more questions for you. Like I said, everybody wants to be or aspires to be a C-suite executive. You have done that with some of the biggest names, biggest companies in the game. But you have also been an entrepreneur. And I want you to talk to me about your company, Writeful Place. I know you as this marketing expert. Can you give me, and I want to talk about it for a couple of reasons, right? Number one, I love entrepreneurship, and many of the people who watch this program or they listen in podcast form, they're entrepreneurs. They want to learn from people like yourself. But there's also this person who is working at a job and they know they don't want to be there, but they're scared to take that leap of faith, to bet on themselves. And you starting this company after so much success and truthfully so much security. What made you go out there and say, you know what, now's the right time, I'm going to do it for me?
Yeah, man, listen, it's a great point. I mean, listen, to try to become an entrepreneur after being, a C-suite executive and getting, a bunch of high paid jobs and guaranteed, income, and at 50 years old to decide I'm gonna be an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart, right? And if I'm gonna be 100% honest, because that's who I am, it was extremely difficult. Like I struggled mightily for really the better part of 2 years, man. And like, you become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and it becomes a lot more difficult when, like, you find out very quickly that you're really, really good at spending other people's money, not so good at spending your own. Right? I don't like spending my money. Right? Yeah, that feels different. Like that first class flight is different when it's like someone else's money. When it's your money, it's like, you know what, maybe I could be in the coach. I'm cool with that, right? So yeah, it's not an easy transition. So the person that's at that job that's just trying to that's afraid. The reality is, it's like everything else in life. You've got to just take the leap of faith, and if you believe in yourself. And by the way, it's probably better off to do it sooner than later, because as you get older, it becomes more difficult. Now, when you're older, you have other circumstances that maybe make it that balance it out. So, like, I have very, very accomplished friends that I can lean on that I might not have had when I was younger. And so, there's probably gives and takes and, positive and negatives on both sides. But, for me, it's actually, it goes into the name of the company, Rightful Place, right? It was time for me to take my rightful place in the universe. Like, I knew what I was doing for other people. And like I told you, like, the most important people to me is my family. And so, like, at what point am I going to take my skills and invest them in things that were going to change the trajectory for my family? And one thing that was great is that, like, my wife was 100% supportive of it, which you need, right? Because, it's going to be some tough times. And so you need like your most important people to have your back and to be complicit, that they have been at the table making that decision with you. Like, you don't want to have that lack of clarity, or where it's like, well, we was living this way and now we got to struggle. That's crazy. I ain't signed up for that. Like, so everybody needs to know what they're getting into, right? Which is, and then that's when you got the right people in your corner too, right? People that support the promise because of what you could turn this thing into. So, Rightful Place was, for me, was that realization of, like, because if you think about my journey, right? I've worked with, like, I have worked with the most amazing people in culture. And so what happened was I was working at a company, and I was very close with the CEO. The CEO got let go. They hired a new person. And for the first time in probably 20 years, I was reporting to someone who I didn't really think was that talented, right? And it became hard. Like, I couldn't fake that. You know what I mean? Like I found myself knowing more about the business than the person I'm reporting to. And then I realized that, and I had this conversation last night with Ron Gilliard. I realized that I can't, at this age, be trying to convince somebody of what's necessary to be successful if they just not ready to take it, right? Like, it's hard. It's hard. Like, if you're in the client business, it can become difficult if you're always trying to compel somebody to do something that you know for sure, based on your experience and your gut and all the things that you've done in your life and everything that you know about culture and where you sit in culture, right? You know that this is the path. And the person that makes the decisions has none of those things, but because they're making a decision, they can decide, like, nah, that don't make sense, right? And so that became difficult for me, and to the point where I was like, it's time, man. It's time for me to take my rightful place. As I started to think of the name of the company, it very, very quickly came to that. But the company is spelled WRITEFUL, so rightful, sort of double entendre on the fact that we are creating new narratives for people, brands, and companies to monetize their intellectual property and maximize their income ability. And so as a marketer, right, I was really, really good at making art and storytelling and creating an energy around a brand. But wasn't, when I was younger, wasn't so concerned about how much it helped sell things, because I just thought, that would happen inherently. There was a role that I had that, young Jewish brother by the name of Yehuda Schmidman, really like a whiz kid CEO. He's not even 40 years old and has been CEO of like some of the biggest companies in the world. He one time said to me, you know what? I'm going to make you the president of the fashion division at this company. We had just purchased the Jessica Simpson business, and he wanted someone to be like the president of fashion. And I made the joke one day, like, I want that to be me someday. And he was like, well, let's do it today. And I was like, whoa. And for the first time, I was in charge of like the P&L, right? And that gave me visibility on how to take my marketing prowess and position it in a way that it unlocked unexploited revenue potential. So if you think about the licensing business, right? Licensing is taking something. Hunter Boots is a good example. The brand Hunter is known for making boots. So license it, and so whoever owns Hunter, they manufacture boots, and then they distribute it to retailers across the world, and they may open up stores, and they whatever they find up, they have digital, an e-commerce platform. They find ways to sell the boots that they make, but they're experts in making boots. So what are the other categories that Hunter has the right to show up in? Well, I would imagine outerwear is probably a good idea, right? Maybe it's performance active wear for like people who like to, do crazy outside things. Like, so what are the other things that this brand has the right to do, and how do I create the relationships and the story around that helps sell that above and beyond? So like you have a business that's known for X, how do you sell people Y, Z, and ABC that's connected to it in an authentic way? And that's what Rightful Place is really positioned to do. And so it's not like a normal business where I'm looking to go out and have, 25 different clients. It's really a community. So it's also, the amalgamation of the relationships and the experiences that I've had over the years. So I know amazing people. So if I'm trying to find somebody to help me, create a group of influencers to go out on the ground and do things for me, I know I can call Shawn Prez. If I'm not trying to find someone who's wants a bunch of tastemakers to do things, I can call Coltrane Curtis. If I'm looking for whatever it is, I have a consortium, an ecosystem. We talked about ecosystem earlier in the conversation. I have an ecosystem of the best of the best, right? We have done this at the highest level in culture. I really pride myself on being in the culture business, right? We have been on the top of pop culture, marketing to the community of people that we lead forever, right? And so I know all the best of the best. I know how to get in, and we've actually, not even intentionally, just in conversation, have mentioned probably 15 of those folks, whether it be Kenny Burns, Dean, whoever. All of it. Like think about even what COVID did. COVID showed you how creative we are as a people, right? As a culture. Like the pivot was amazing. So like, just imagine that, D Nice went from literally doing an Instagram live from his living room because he was bored, right? Yeah. And I was on there the first night, right? The first night it was maybe 1,500 of us on there, right? And the crazy part of it was like the most amazing reunion ever. Oh, Prez, what up? Yo, we talking, right? And it's quick. It's happening quick. And then literally 3 days later, there's 100,000 people, and it's Rihanna and Michelle Obama, right? And it's just a power. It's a testament to the power of who we are, because like, D Nice is the same person to me that you are, that Emmett is. Like, he's my man that I would always show up. If I call him to ask him to do something, he's doing it. He knows vice versa, right? So we have this amazing ecosystem of experts, people who are on the cutting edge of culture that, and by the way, that are intentionally, from this culture, right? And so like, again, going back to being the only one in the room, how do I fill the room up with people who I know will deliver at the level that I know that that is expected. And so, that's what Rightful Place is. It's called a new narrative community. And it's really about, me having intimate relationships with companies, brands, or personalities. And I say intimate because, for me to put my time into something, it has to yield a reward that's exponential to what it may be worth at face value. And so, if I'm getting paid a retainer, there has to be an incremental upside on my ability to unlock unexploited revenue. So if I help you make a bunch of money that you weren't planning on making, I need a piece of that, right? But that requires a lot more time investment. And so, and then also I have to have the ability to bring the best and the brightest people of color to the table to help us get it done. And so, rather than me have, 40, 50 employees, I could get things done with 2 or 3, really just managing my ecosystem. And so, so that was important. And then obviously, what always is important is that, I didn't want to be the guy that always had the job to my kids, right? Like if I'm trying to inspire my children to think differently and not be comfortable, then I gotta do that myself. I think about that all the time, right? Because if you're someone who's challenging your children to be their best selves, then you damn near better do that to yourself too. Because you don't want to be the guy, right? Like I have a good friend. He and I grew up together. I can't think of his last name, so he ain't that good of a friend, right? My man Mark, he played basketball at Seton Hall, and he was in the league for a long time. He was on the bench at OKC, and he's on the bench somewhere else now. And I saw him at the All-Star game one time, and he had lost a bunch of weight. He was in shape. And I was like, man, you look good, boy. I had my Andre Harrell. Boy, you look good, right? And he was like, yo, man, I found out, I couldn't be telling these elite athletes that they needed to work their hardest and be fat. Like, a fat guy can't tell somebody they need to be in shape, right? And so, like, a guy whose, situation, and you can enter whatever it is, whose spirituality, whose work ethic, whose loyalty, all the things that we want from our kids, that we demand from our children, you better have that shit yourself if you really, really want to be a leader of young men or a leader of beautiful young woman in your own house, right? And so, the worst thing that could ever happen is for my kids to be like, yo, you telling me to do this, but you ain't doing it, right? And so, like, I find myself pushing myself, and it's a perpetual pushing of myself. Like, I will never, ever, like, reach the highest point, because when I get there, then it's like on to the next thing. And then there's also like there's this delicate balance of like smelling the roses from time to time too, right? Like, I had an amazing moment after Andre's funeral. A bunch of folks, and it's, in the midst of COVID, right? A bunch of folks came to my house, and we had like our own little repast, right? And I had like Chuck Bone over here, and who else? Matt Middleton. And it was dope, man. It was like, and then we ended up being on a call with Jimmy Love, and like it was like, and by the way, I just felt touched to even be invited to the funeral. You know what I'm saying? I was like, man, like, and I will show up for Andre every day, right? Because he's one of the most amazing people that I've ever met in my life. And so, those are the moments where you smell the roses of, like, you get a chance to get a visual of what you've been a part of. Mm-hmm. And it's a privilege, man. It's a privilege to be a part of it. Success is rented, not bought, and rent is due every day, right? And so, you got to keep on showing up, like, to be a part of this thing. I remember when I was trying to get on, right? And like I said, I was really with no agenda, but like I definitely wanted to be on, right? I show up every day like I'm still that kid. It's funny. I tell the story, and I know he's gonna be watching this. My man Brett Wright introduced me to Lou Tucker when Heavy D, God bless my brother Hev, when Hev was the president the president of Uptown Records, and Lou was the general manager, and he and I didn't know each other. I would see him, but we didn't know each other. And I my man B Wright set me up with an interview with him, and I went to Uptown, and I sat in that waiting room for like 2.5 hours. 2.5. I'm sitting there, people come in, go. I look crazy. At a certain point, the receptionist is like, "You want some water?" And I'm like, "Man, if I drink any more water," you know what I'm saying? and then I go into his office, right? And I sit there, and he's like, on the phone, not paying attention. And then he literally finally turns around and goes, "So you B Wright's man, right?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "All right, cool. I just wanted to put a name with the face, acknowledge your existence. Cool. Appreciate you. Ain't nothing really cracking right now, but appreciate you." And I remember I was tight. I was like, yo, this nigga had me here for 2 hours, and that's it. Fast forward. The VMAs, when Puff was dating Jennifer Lopez and she wore the dress, right? I was one of Blue Flame. I actually threw the after party. So we had a dinner first, and then we went to a party. Right now, you were definitely there. And I'm sitting at the table right next to Hev, right, and across from Lou, and I'm telling them the story. And y'all interviewed me and had me sit there for 2 hours in the joint, right? And Hev was like, "Yo, that was Lou," right? And Lou was like, nah, I don't remember that. So like, that's the beauty of it, man. Like, if you show up every day like you still that kid trying to get on, someday you'll be sitting across some guys that you was looking up to, and y'all all will be in the same table having the same meal, and they won't even remember that you was the guy trying to get on, because in their minds you've been on forever. Like, nah, you was never trying to get on. You always been here.
That's right.
And that's how you got to show up.
But that's when you know you arrived, Jameel. That's when you know you part of the family. When they look at you and they can't even remember a time when you wasn't on, when you wasn't a part of the circle.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you know you did something. And I want to stress these lessons because you get in a circle through showing up every day. I love the quote, and I'm gonna steal that quote that you said. You said success.
Anything I got is yours, brother. You don't got to steal it. I'm giving it to you.
Okay, thank you. So you make sure I got this right. You said success is rented, and the rent is due every day.
Every day.
Every day. Like, how real is that? But if you're willing to pay, that tax, if you're willing to pay that rent every day, those same people that you looked up to, one day you're gonna have that seat at the table. And that's really what it's all about. I remember when I was young, and for me, even to this minute, I just always wanted a seat at the table. Like whatever this mysterious table is that everybody works so hard to get to, where your name rings out and the people who you looked up to now look at you as a peer with respect and have reverence for you the same way you have reverence for them. That's what you're working for. So I love that you brought these stories up because it's needed, and somebody needs to hear that it can be done. It can be done. You can be an intern today. In a few years down the road, you are sitting you might not be at the head of the table, but you're sitting at the table with the people you looked up to.
No, there's a picture. And the picture has been run. I think you might have been the first one to post it. It was around the time that Dre passed away, right? And there's a picture from Puff's 40th birthday party. You remember this? We was at the dinner. I want to say it was at the Standard Hotel, right? And it's me, you, Lou Tucker.
Oh yeah, I posted it. You hit me. You hit me. Said send me that picture. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That table was amazing.
That table was incredible.
Amazing, right? Like just and I remember I was sitting next to Puff, right, and him being like, "Man, I'm stressed. I'm 40, man. I'm depressed." And I was like, "You depressed?" And I said, "Man, you bugging, my brother. You are. Do you know that at 40 years old, a young man can't even close to compete with you? They got no shot. Your conversation, your information, your access is so different. There's a young guy would give his left arm to be you right now. You better take that role and run with it."
A guy would give his left arm.
Yeah, like come on, brother. But just imagine, like I was the guy waiting in the waiting room at Uptown Records when Heavy D was the president. See what I'm saying? So Puff had gone on to do whatever he's doing, and now I'm sitting next to Puff. Now I call Puff my brother. I call him. I'm at his house. He gave me this house in Miami for my birthday last year, and I was there for 12 days with my family and my kids. Like, come on, man. Like, if that ain't the testimony to hard work and not giving up and keeping your heart in the right place, I don't know what is. You know what I mean? Like, I remember looking at all of these guys like, man, right? But I didn't try hard to get on. I just kept on being me. I kept on being me. I want to tell a story about Andre Harrell, because I met Andre when he was running when Uptown was Uptown, and I literally this had to be 1990, right? And I went up to the joint on 7th Avenue, and I was going to meet with Brett. And the funny thing is that Brett and I grew up together, but we wasn't really friends, right? He was from Montclair, I was from South Orange, and we had like beef. And we never had beef with each other. It was really like my friends ain't like his friends, right? But I went up to the office to meet with him, and that day I didn't meet, but I saw Puff, I saw Lou Tucker, and they all were like coming into Brett's office to talk about. I think I saw Jimmy Love, right? And then we ended up going to Negril. Remember Negril, the Jamaican joint? I want to say it was on like 23rd Street or whatever, right? We ended up going to Negril for lunch. And here comes Andre Harrell. He walks in with like 2 girls, and he's like, "Oh, niggas, new niggas." He's like, "Oh, who are y'all?" Right? And then I said my name, whatever. And I remember seeing him all the time after that. And in my mind, I never ever went up to him and was like, "Hey, man, hey, Jameel," right? Because I was like, I'm not talking to him until I have something to say. Fast forward, I don't know, 7 years later, I got a house in the Hamptons by myself, right? With my family, but people would be sharing houses. I had to join by myself because I had my own little company going. I think I was working at Vibe at the time. And he came to my house to pick up a girl because she was friends with my ex-wife. And so he comes to the house, him and Russell come to the house to pick the girl up. And so they waiting, she's getting whatever, getting her stuff together. And I'm outside, with the kids, whatever. I might've been on the grill, and him and Russell are sitting there. And so Andre goes to me, yo, man, so what do you do? He's like, I see you everywhere. What do you do? And for the first time, I had something to say.
There you go.
I was like, yeah, I work at Vibe. I got my own company. I'm doing this, that. And he was like, oh, okay. Like, it was a whole different thing. Like, I didn't rush to meet him just to meet him. And that's something that people should learn too. Like, don't be running up on folks if you ain't got nothing to say. Like, you just going up just trying to be like, then you like a fan. And that's, that's cool if that's what you're into. But like, if you really believe, if you have intentions at sitting at the table, then you know what? Be calculated, be measured. Don't just go like, I was very, very measured around the fact that I don't want to talk to this man until I got something to say. And then the reality is that he ended up coming to me. I didn't know he was coming. I literally was like, on the grill with my kids. I was like, oh, okay, what's up, man? What up? And he asked me, what do you do? And it was so funny. It was like one of those aha moments where I was like, yo, I'm so glad I moved the way I moved. Right? Because it would have been whack.
That's such a special feeling. What you're saying is such a special feeling, Jameel, when you work and you're doing it for yourself, but you're going so hard that other people notice, people who you respect, people you admire. And the fact that this story comes full circle, that the guy who you look up to, Andre Harrell, who you met once before, but you ain't going up to him constantly trying to get him to remember you. Now he sees you putting in the work year over year over year. He feels compelled to come up. Okay, you're out here in the Hamptons with a house by yourself. You're clearly doing something right.
That's he was looking around like, what do you do?
Nah, that's such a special feeling, man. And I'm so happy you're bringing up these points because it's such great gems that people need to hear. This is your story, but the gems, the wisdom that comes out of it, it should hopefully apply to somebody who's taking time out to listen to your story, because this is great wisdom that you're giving.
Well, the reality is this, man. All of our stories are meant are intended to affect someone else. It ain't about us, right? These stories, and I think that in a normal world, right, there's varying degrees of proximity. So it's like you start off with like, this is for me and my family, me and my sons, right? Then it becomes, me and the people who are in my ecosystem. And then, something like COVID happens, right? Or something like Donald Trump happens, right? Where you start to feel compelled to make an impact on the world, right? Because I literally believe we have the power to change the world, right? You and I, we were on that call the other night, and I'm looking at all these amazing, accomplished faces, and it occurs to me, I'm like, I know the illest people in culture. Like the illest people, the most accomplished people, the people that people really, really want to connect with. Like, and what's funny is like, you don't even realize, like, even like a guy like Kenny Burns. So Kenny Burns, when I was at Bad Boy and running Blue Flame, he was managing Dream. I don't know if you remember this. Remember, he was managing Dream.
Yes,
and the funny thing is, real talk, I met Kenny Burns on the basketball court in Brooklyn. I didn't even know who he was. And me and him was going at it. And I was like, I like my man's energy. And then next time I saw him was like, probably How Can I Be Down, right? And then he was, and then the funny thing is, when you share space with someone, you end up like feeling their energy, especially when your energy is similar, right? And so I remember like, a couple of years ago, we was at Puff's house for New Year's Eve or something, and we had the crazy conversation where he was like, yo, man, I appreciate you. I just appreciate everything about you, how you move with your family, how you show up as an executive, how you really resonate as a Black man. And I had this, and I was like, yo, I feel the same way about you, right? And so like, there's just the beauty of like, because like, this is all God, right? Like, there's no universe that we supposed to all sort of like meet up at this point in time in life and have this ability at this point in life. Like, you from the Bronx, right? I'm from Newark, New Jersey. Kenny is from DC. Emmett is from Liberia. Like, there's no universe that we were supposed to all come. Like, this is God, right? This is bigger than all of us. And so, it's our responsibility to repay the blessings that we've been given through hard work and being open and honest about giving it back to the people. And so these stories are great. We lived them, right? We keep on telling them, and we keep on telling them because it's meant to inspire. Like, and it's funny because you can end up inspired. Like, I end up having a conversation with Emmett the other day, telling him about, remember we did Vote or Die, and we went and we got Anheuser-Busch, the brother that ran diversity at Anheuser-Busch, because Anheuser-Busch was one of our clients at Blue Flame. We called him and he gave us $1 million to run billboards all around the country. He just and the conversation was like 15 minutes long. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna call you back in an hour." And I got $1 million. It was literally that simple. And I remember Puff was trying to get on the phone with Steve Jobs, and we was all sitting in. So it was scheduled for 1:00 on Tuesday, and so we all sitting in there. It's like me, Emmett. I'm pretty sure you was in the room. And he gets on the phone with the assistant, and the assistant's acting funny about putting him on the phone with Puff. And Puff starts to feel it. He goes, "Excuse me, miss, are you trying to tell me that he don't want to speak to me?" And she starts hemming and hawing. He goes, up. Let me help you out. Tell him I see him at the top. And I told Emmett that story the other day, and he was like, "Oh, I forgot all about that. That's crazy," right? And so, like, these stories, they're our journey, but it's not only meant to, inspire others. It's to reinvigorate us.
That's
like,
right.
Let's not forget all that we've done. Like, let's not be cool. Like, let's not be cool, man. Like, let's really, really celebrate us, because, man, I love me some us.
That's
like,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I look at you doing your thing. I look at all of the brothers and sisters, and we talked about a lot of them, Dia and whoever it is. But I look at everybody doing their thing, and like, I don't know if you could feel it or not, but I just want y'all to know I appreciate it and I love it. It makes me feel like I'm in the right place, right? Like, I'm at the right table.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, Jameel, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your candor, your energy, your willingness to give back. And even as you're talking, I'm just smiling because you're walking me down memory lane. But before I close it out, I need this to say while you're breathing. I need to say this while you're breathing, is as a brother, as a friend, as a man, I love you. And you have been very, very inspirational, because even as you're talking, obviously the audience doesn't know our relationship, but I could just remember walking by your office and sitting in your office and being in some of the meetings that you spoke about, and you're just bringing me back to such a special time in my life. And to be able to have these conversations, not just about us, but to hopefully inspire the next generation, is just a blessing. So again, I just want to say thanks for your time. Thanks for the great energy. And while you can hear this and while you're breathing, I'm giving you your flowers while you can still smell them. You are a true power move maker. Thank you.
By the way, I love you too. And to let you know I'm paying attention to everything that you do, you, my brother, are essential.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna tell you that's we're ending right here, right? All of us, we got to look ourselves in the mirror and have an honest conversation with ourselves and just ask, am I essential? And if you can't think in any part of your life, whether it's business, personal, whatever, am I essential to the relationship that I have? You doing something wrong. It's time for you to step your game up. Thanks
Amen.
a lot, Jameel.
Amen, my brother.
What's up, guys? Thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video. Truly appreciate you. If you like anything you heard here today, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you know anybody that can benefit from this message, feel free to share. Peace and love.